So Michael Page is going to be making his debut this weekend at UFC 299 in a very, very good spot on the main card of UFC 299, which is a super stacked pay-per-view card, which I'm sure a lot of people are very excited for. But I just wanted to talk about Michael Page in the UFC in general, and talk about him in the UFC, of course. You know, he just signed from Bellator, but then also who I think that he will be fighting next if he was to win against Kevin Holland, or if he was to lose. And of course, as you can imagine, the grass is much greener on the winning side than it is on the losing side for MVP. MVP is coming into the UFC right now and is immediately getting a ranked opponent, as Kevin Holland is number 13 in the rankings right now. But I feel like more importantly for MVP, Kevin Holland's a pretty big name. Kevin Holland is not a guy that people have no idea who he is. He's a very popular fighter, and a lot of people quite like him, and a lot of people respect him as well. So if MVP is able to get past Kevin Holland, it'll not only put him in the UFC rankings, it'll also give him a win over a very big name opponent that a lot of UFC fans will respect. One thing I do want to point out about MVP is his age. This guy is almost 37 years old, so if he is ever going to want to become a champion of the UFC, he has to do it right now. It's not like he's just signing to the UFC and he's 29 years old and he does maybe have a couple of years to get used to the UFC, or just kind of fight a few guys and work his way slowly up the rankings. He has to rush up the rankings. If he wants to be a champion, he's got to go straight up there. So I'm thinking, if he beats Kevin Holland, they're going to give him a really big opportunity next, and it could be an opportunity which some fans may not like. But I'm talking about Fight Night main event. I genuinely believe that if MVP was to beat the 13th ranked Kevin Holland, they will jump him up all the way up there and give him the 8th ranked 41-year-old Stephen Thompson in a matchup. Now, I do understand that they have trained together in the past, so some people don't really like the matchup for that reason. This is the fight to make, though. I mean, come on. Michael Page, if he gets past Kevin Holland versus Stephen Thompson, is a striker's delight. It's two long, rangy strikers fighting against each other. I genuinely believe that with a win over Kevin Holland, you're going to get Stephen Thompson versus Michael Venom Page in a Fight Night main event that could be in the US, that could be in that card in Manchester, and I know Manchester is not London, but MVP is from London, by the way, and Manchester is a 4-hour drive from London, and I understand that cities in London aren't the same. MVP would still be the hometown fighter in that Fight Night card, so you could do MVP versus Thompson in Manchester, which is a card that has been confirmed to not be a pay-per-view. It will just be a Fight Night in UK, so I feel like MVP versus Thompson could headline in the USA. It could also headline in the UK as well. Or they could kind of go down a different route and give MVP another big name that could definitely headline in Europe, and a name and a ranking spot which is actually going to be above Stephen Thompson, and give him the number 6 ranked Ian Garry. I genuinely think that maybe they could see Ian Garry and they could see the close fight that he had against Jeff Neal and think, hey, maybe Ian Garry just isn't a guy that we want to push just yet. Maybe we want to give Ian Garry a fight down the rankings, as if we give him a fight up the rankings, who knows? He might not be able to get past Covington. He might not be able to get past Burns, Rachmanov, etc. You guys know what I mean. I do think him versus Covington is the fight to make. But if Colby Covington doesn't want the fight, I'm sure Michael Venom Page will take that opportunity to become the number 6 ranked UFC welterweight in the world after his first fight in the UFC. In a second fight, he could fight Ian Garry, who is undefeated, who is a big name, who once again would add another big name to his resume if he was able to win. And once again, stylistically, this is a fantastic fight between a young striker who uses his range well against an older striker who also uses his range well. And more importantly, it would put Ian Garry up against a guy that has a much longer reach than him, so it'd be interesting to see how he was to potentially deal with that. And aside from those fights, I do think maybe if Jack Della Maddalena loses to Burns and MVP wins, they could do him versus Della Maddalena, because it's been confirmed that a card is going to be in Perth, UFC 305. Maybe they do that. Maybe if he wins, they could do him versus Jeff Neal as well. There are other options, but I think the best number 1 option for a win from MVP would be to fight Stephen Thompson next. This is where the losing goes, and it does get very bad, and then there's matchups that just kind of would make sense, because I am assuming that the UFC has given MVP a pretty sizable contract, and if he does lose to Kevin Holland, they're probably not going to just want to sacrifice him to nobody, or they're going to want to get him a win, which once again would be respectable enough for him to get another ranked fight. So I've kind of gone down two routes here. The first one is punishment. Michael Morales, 24 years old, young, 16-0, very well-rounded, former national wrestling champion in Ecuador. I did recognize the flag, and I also read that, so I cheated. But anyway, the point is, Michael Morales, I feel like he is a guy that is going to get a big step up soon, and MVP might be that step up if he loses to Kevin Holland. If he loses to Kevin Holland, they might say, hey, let's try and give MVP a pretty fun matchup against a veteran, which he might be able to get a win against. Santiago Ponzinibbio, 37 years old, recently made a comeback after having some sort of blood disease, which is very terrifying, to be honest. He come back to fight against Li Jingliang after having a fantastic career in the UFC. Still does have a great career in the UFC. He beat Alex Morono and Miguel Baeza, which are pretty good wins, although the Baeza win did age poorly, and he's lost to guys that are really, really good. But the point is, they might go down this route. You know, we just lost to Kevin Holland. MVP just lost to Kevin Holland. I don't know, maybe Kevin Holland would have something to say on online about that. But the point is, that's another fight I think they could go down, or they could go down this route, which I think is pretty unrealistic. This next one is very unrealistic, to be honest. But if MVP was to lose to Kevin Holland, another stylistic matchup, which would be absolutely perfect, would be MVP versus Carlos Prates, because Carlos Prates, once again, is a rangy Muay Thai striker who uses his range well, and he's a pure striker. This guy is not going to wrestle. MVP ain't going to wrestle, so they could just put these two up against each other. 79-inch reach versus 78-inch reach. Carlos Prates has Muay Thai tattooed on his chest. I think you know what he wants to do. He wants to strike. That would be an option. I feel like that would, once again, I don't think it would be punishment, because I actually think MVP would be able to... Oh, do I... What am I thinking? Of course I think MVP would be able to beat Carlos Prates, but Carlos Prates is a guy with just so much sneaky power that maybe he could catch him. But I think once again this would just be a matchup where the UFC would be like, here's a really, really fun fight. MVP probably wins it. Let's do this matchup in front of a crowd, maybe even in Brazil or in the UK again, who knows. And then the next one is kind of punishment, kind of not, because I think MVP would be able to turn him away. But it's, hey, let's give this prospect who's probably one fight away, maybe two fights away from getting an option to be in the rankings, Chaos Williams. Now, once again, I think that MVP would probably be able to beat Chaos Williams, who will be the young up-and-coming prospect in this matchup. But don't forget, Chaos Williams does have a lot of power, although he wasn't really able to show it off like whatsoever against Rolando Bedoya, and it was a pretty bad performance for him. But Chaos Williams is Chaos Williams. He's, you know, lost to Randy Brown. Sorry, I thought he beat Randy Brown. But anyway, the point is, Chaos Williams will be deserving of a UFC opportunity somewhat soon. Not a UFC opportunity, a ranked opportunity somewhat soon. Maybe they do this. It would kind of be a punishment, kind of be, hey, how good is Chaos Williams? How good is MVP really? Let's find out. That's kind of what I was thinking, and aside from that, that's it. So let me know what you think. If MVP beats Kevin Holland, who do you think he fights next? If he loses to Kevin Holland, who do you think he fights next? Let me know what you think of this video in general, and I'll see you guys in the next one.